Boa tarde, buenas tardes, good local time. For those who are online or wherever you are, welcome to the third session of the 6 days of the European Language and Literature Festival. It is a great pleasure for the session we have today. It is a privilege. Before we welcome our speakers and our guests, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please remember, when you're watching this online, to use the worldwide icon, the world icon down on the right, so you can choose which language you're going to use for the translation. If you leave it the way it is, you just will have the original language, but then if you click there, you can choose between Japanese or English and change it for the questions and for anything you may require. The rest, it is an honor, a privilege, the session we have today. Saramago is a very dear writer for all that we were born in Spain, especially the ones in the 80s, that when we were teenagers had the chance of discovering the pleasures of literature through his work. So I'm delighted to welcome to the stage our family, people from Literaturas Hermanas, brothers in literature, brothers in writing. Please welcome the Ambassador of Portugal, Mr. Victor Sereno. Thank you very much.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Es un gustazo para mí personalmente estar acá. Gracias, Javier, por tu acogida. Nosotros, portugueses, nos sentimos verdaderamente en casa acá en Cervantes. Muchas gracias. Ahora que practiqué mi castellano, un castellano hablado en Buenos Aires, he aprendido en Buenos Aires, ahora me voy a hablar en inglés. Y un saludo muy cordial, muy especial a todos que nos acompañan en línea. Un abrazo portugués muy sentido. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the European Literature Festival. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing my good friend, José Luís Peixoto, one of Portugal's great contemporary literary voices, and, as I told you before, a great friend of mine. This session is a tribute to José Saramago, Portugal's Nobel Prize of Literature, as we celebrate his 100th anniversary. Throughout the year, the Embassy and the Portuguese Cultural Center, with the support of José Saramago Foundation, have organized several events to commemorate the memory and works of one of our greatest authors. These have included exhibitions, book talks, group activities with students, and others. This event is the highlight of our program for many reasons. First, José Luís, where are you, José Luís? There. First, José Luís Peixoto is one of our most famous and international authors, with 2 books published in Japanese and other 30 languages. This is his 3rd time in Japan to talk about his works. Second, Peixoto is one of few authors to have received the José Saramago Award back in 2001. He has an intimate knowledge of the late Nobel laureates and can claim to be one of his best successors. Third, José Luís Peixoto is also a multifaceted public intellectual. As we will learn later, he has been engaged in many projects related to Saramago, to education, to cultural heritage, and to tourism. The project Journey to Portugal Revisited is only one of the latest examples. to conclude, I'm firmly convinced that any commemoration of José Saramago must include the talent, the experience, and the literary vision of José Luís Peixoto. Thank you, José Luís, for accepting our invitation to come to Tokyo and share your wisdom with us. Thank you, muchas gracias, Javier, also to the Cervantes Institute, the European Union delegation, and the European Literature Festival for making this event possible. Please enjoy the talk. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm José Luís Peixoto. I have to start thanking to the Ambassador Vitor Sereno for the generosity of your words. Thank you very much. Also for the generosity of your friendship, which actually has some relationship with Saramago, as I will explain a bit later. But also I have to thank the generosity of Instituto Cervantes Tokyo for having us here today, and the invitation to be part of this beautiful festival, which gave me the opportunity to come back to Tokyo, a city that I love, a country that I love, Japan. Please excuse me for if I start talking about myself, but in order to talk about Saramago, I think it's important that I explain you a few things about my relationship with Saramago, so that you know where the things that I have to say about Saramago come from. I have, it's funny, the first time I was in the presence of José Saramago, it was in 1997. It was before José Saramago got the Nobel Prize for Literature. He was awarded with that prize in the year 1998, so a year later. And at that time, and it was in Coimbra, the hometown of Ambassador Vitor Sereno, I was living there at the time, and Saramago went there for a presentation, and I attended with one of his most famous novels in Portugal, one that in Portuguese is called Memorial do Convento, and that in English it's called Baltasar and Blimunda. And José Saramago was always very generous, giving autographs. And when the time arrived, I was there in the line, and he asked me about my name. And I told him José Luís Peixoto, my full name, because I already had this ambition of being an author, even though I was 20, I was really young, 22, 23 maybe. And then he wrote something. Then I stepped aside, and then when I went there to read it, he had written "Tu José Luís Pacheco." So he misspelled my name. Instead of Peixoto, he wrote Pacheco. And now I have this novel signed by José Saramago, and it seems like I stole the novel because it's under a completely different name. And at that time, we did not know that a few years later, only 4 years later, in the year 2001, I would be in his presence, because My first novel was awarded with the award José Saramago, and a funny coincidence is that that same novel is the one that was just published here in Japan, in Japanese translation. But it was incredibly important for me because in that time, in the year 2001, I was 27 years old. I was in front of José Saramago, who had won the Nobel Prize for Literature only 3 years before that. And I was completely amazed by the fact that that award had been given to one of my books. And it changed my life because only a few months before that, I was completely unknown in Portugal. And after that award, everybody wanted to know who was that guy who got the award. Everybody was curious about the book. And it made me become a professional writer. And also, it gave me the opportunity to know José Saramago in person. Because at that time, he already knew my name was Peixoto and not Pacheco. And since then, since 2001 till the year 2010, which was the year that José Saramago passed away, I had a lot of opportunities to be with him. And that's where Ambassador Vitor Sereno enters, because we met in Buenos Aires in the year 2003. I was there attending Buenos Aires book fair, and José Saramago was also there. He was participating in the same book fair. And for me, I have to say, as an author at the time, I was, of course, very impressed to be in Buenos Aires in the book fair there at the time. I was it was the first time I was in Argentina, and it was among the first times that I ever went abroad with my books. And I had never seen such a reception as the one that José Saramago was having at the time. He was presenting one of his novels, O Homem Duplicado. I don't really know the name of this novel in English, El Hombre Duplicado. And it was incredible how the Argentinian readers and audiences received him, not only in the book fair, but in all the events he attended. It was so amazing that people even had like protests at the door of the venues because they wanted to go in and they were all fully booked. And it was something I had never seen with an author before. In Portugal, we are this country of 10 million people in the corner of Europe. We have a very important past, but sometimes we don't really know our size in the world. Sometimes we doubt about ourselves. And for me, at the time, to see the size and the reception of José Saramago in a country such as Argentina was amazing. But I have to say that throughout those years, from 2001 to 2010, Saramago, he was already 80 years old. Actually, he was 79 in 2001, but then he turned 80 in the following year. And one of the things that was also very incredible for me personally was his energy, his vitality, the way he was. His schedule was incredible. It was all over the world at the time. He was living as a Nobel laureate for literature, and he had an amazing schedule in universities throughout the world. And me, I was 27, then 28, 29, and it was really incredible to see someone of that age to be so involved and so invested and so so enthusiastic about the work, and because he had all that big schedule, and at the same time he was still writing and publishing regularly new novels, new books, and that was also something that touched me deeply, and that still remains with me until today. But one other thing that I would like to tell you about my specific relationship with José Saramago, and then I will talk especially about Saramago, but I think this is a little bit important to give you a bit of context, is that in the year 2019, I published one novel in Portugal called Autobiografia, Autobiography. It's a bit of an ironical title because it's not an autobiography, but it's a novel called Autobiography. But one of the main characteristics of that novel is the fact that the main character of the novel is José Saramago. So I turned José Saramago, the person, into a character of the novel, which actually is something that he himself has done in a certain way with one of the heteronyms of Fernando Pessoa on the book One da Morte de Ricardo Reis, the year of the death of Ricardo Reis. And in a certain way, I did a bit the same with José Saramago himself. As I did that, I affirmed, it was my way of saying and of recognizing my relationship with Saramago and the importance of that relationship in my life and the way that person touched me and that I wanted to have in my work, that I wanted to be part of my work, like a tattoo, like something that that you cannot remove. In this novel, I revisit a lot of periods of José Saramago's life, and I mix them with a lot of fiction. And that leads me to José Saramago's life. In this year, 2022, actually about 10 days ago, on the 16th of November, Saramago would have turned 100 years old. He was born on the 16th of November of 1922. And his life, his chronology as an author is very unusual because if you look at other authors' lives, not many can be compared with this one. José Saramago has published his first novel when he was 25 years old, a novel that he would want it to be titled The Widow, but that it ended up being titled Land of Sin by suggestion of the editor. And that novel was not very well received in Portugal. Actually, at the time, it happened probably one of the worst things that may happen to a book from the author's perspective, which is it was almost completely unnoticed. And so that gave life to a lot of his insecurities, and it was very hard for him to write his second novel. He did a lot of false starts. He started writing a lot of works that didn't end, and it was only when he was about 30-something that he finished his second novel. And when he finished that novel, so it was in the 50s, when he finished that novel, a friend of his in Lisbon found a way of ending the novel to a publisher, but that publisher never answered him back. He never got any answer from that publisher. And also one thing that it's curious about this is that that manuscript that is sent to the editor was the only copy of the novel. So only in the 80s, that editor, after he got some success, came and said, I have this novel that you sent me 30 years ago. I would like to publish it. And José Saramago took the manuscript back. He refused to have it published. And it was only published after his death. It's called Claraboia, which I don't know how to translate in English. Claraboia is that window that some houses have in the ceiling. Claraboia. But that experience was very traumatizing for Saramago. And so he spent a few decades without writing. He didn't try to write any other novel in the 50s or in the 60s. In the 60s, he started to translate some works. He started to write. He started to work in a publishing house, but he didn't write. And it was only in the 70s, after the 25th of April, which was the revolution in Portugal that ended dictatorship, when he was already on his late 50s, that he finally wrote one novel. And the novels that he wrote after that, they were extremely successful. They got a lot of recognition. And incredibly, in his late 50s, 60s, and 70s, he made an incredible name, not only in Europe, but also in Latin America and many other countries. And that led him to get the Nobel Prize of Literature in the year 1998. Among his most celebrated novels, you'll find Baltasar Blimunda, that I already talked about, which is a novel that deals with Portuguese history. It deals with a period of Portuguese history in which there was an absolute ruler, that's the time when gold was coming from Brazil and they were building these incredible monuments. And that novel is actually a story with a lot of characters that are connected with a specific monument, a palace and a convent that exists in the town of Mafra, not too far away from Lisbon, which is a really big, extravagantly big monument that exists in that place, and that, of course, is a direct result of this connection that Portugal had with this land across the ocean in Brazil. But then he has written many other books with many other subjects. He has written books that have some in a way parabolic. I don't know if this is the word. That are like examples, stories that can be understood as examples for several issues. One of them is called in English Blindness, in Portuguese Ensaio sobre a Cegueira. And that novel, for example, has been said to have a lot of connections with the pandemic, for example, as the way that people have dealt with this issue. And it's, for example, one of these novels that brings like an example, a story that can be seen as some sort of metaphor. And in this specific novel, Blindness, the basics of the plot is that in a certain city, suddenly everybody becomes blind, and all the people in this city become blind. Everybody in the world becomes blind, and then as we read, we witness the development of this society in which everybody is blind. But also he has written books about writing itself, about the questions that writing poses to the people that write and to the people that read. And also he has written about history, how not only historical novels, but also novels that put the question of how are we looking at history, how are we perceiving history, and these novels, of course, have a very strong vision of society and have a very strong political vision, because that is also a very important aspect of Saramago's work. Actually, the name of our session here today, José Saramago, l'enfant terrible of the Portuguese literature, I think it has a bit to do with that aspect of José Saramago. José Saramago, he was a militant of the Communist Party. He became a militant of that party in the 60s, and he was part of groups of people that were kind of plotting against the dictatorship in Portugal during the late 60s and the first half of the 70s. But even after the end of dictatorship, he has always stayed a militant of the Communist Party. And he was always very daring and unapologetic about his political visions. And that is something that has marked him very much, especially in Portugal, but also in Spain, probably, and in the countries in which he was more active and in where he was more heard in a certain way. Because along with his novels, along with all his literary work, his political work was always very present. I have to say that brought him a lot of enemies, also because he was the way he expressed his opinions was always very, as I said, daring. He had a very confrontive attitude sometimes. And that is very interesting because, of course, that touches a lot of his work. I forgot to say that there are a few of his novels also very important in the way they deal with religion, namely Catholicism, which in Portugal is the most prevalent religion. And Saramago, in the 90s, he has published one book called Gospel According to Jesus Christ, Evangelho segundo Jesus Cristo, that was big polemics at the time. And still, in his late years, he wrote one novel called Cain, which is also very strong as a confrontational text with a few of Catholic dogmas and Catholic church organization, let's say, and all that. It was always at the same time as he was very strongly in the press and in all the media, giving his opinions about all these issues. Another aspect that is very important and it's very curious about José Saramago's work is the way he wrote about Portugal. Because even though his work is very universal. It's read all over the world. The Nobel Prize for Literature, of course, contributed a lot to that. But there are a few of his books that are very specific about Portuguese reality. Curiously enough, there is one that was published in the beginning of the 80s, which is actually called Journey to Portugal, and that was mentioned here before, which is it's not a novel, it's like a travelogue in which Saramago wrote specifically about Portugal from north to south, going to the small places and being very detailed. And maybe it's interesting now to show you a few pictures of this project that I have been involved along with other people. And we had, throughout this year, we had the incredible privilege to travel in a few of those places in Portugal, and to write about it. It was me and some other authors, some invited authors from other countries, and we went there to go to the same places that Saramago went, and to give our contemporary vision about it. And what I would like to show you here is some videos that were, if possible, that were done out of two of these visits. One in, I don't know which order they are, but one is in Setúbal. And no, this one is in Beja, which is in the south of Portugal, in the region of Alentejo. It kind of illustrates a bit this work, and it gives you some pictures of Portugal. This actually is a convent in Beja, where lived a very important nun for Portuguese literature, because she wrote a small book about her romantic infatuations that she had at the time, and it's a very important book for Portuguese literature. This video, it was produced by Tourism of Portugal, of course, so it also has the ambition to promote Portugal and to show people from several countries, including Japan, a bit of Portugal. So Beja is in the interior, and we chose to show also some pictures of Setúbal, which is in the seaside, not far from Lisbon. O gosto seria seguir ao longo das margens do Sado, mas o rio abre um largo e irregular estuário. As águas entram profundamente pela terra dentro, formam ilhas. Com um pouco mais de audácia, o Sado seria outro Volga. So this project is a bit of an invitation to visit Portugal, because I mean, I'm not a spokesman for Tourism of Portugal, but I feel that Tourism of Portugal realized that actually literature can be a way of showing the country to in other cultures. And Saramago, for sure, is a big ambassador of Portuguese culture internationally. And this project, it's available online. It can be read and fully seen, all the materials that were done. I don't know exactly the address, but if you just Google Journey to Portugal Revisited, then I'm sure you will find it. And there you can see the texts that we have been writing, the videos that were done, the pictures that were taken regarding 12 specific parts of Portugal. I have been in some of them, some others were worked by different authors. I thought that it would be interesting now to open a bit for discussion. If you would like to make some questions, you can do it in English or in Japanese, because I can hear the translation here, and it would be really nice to have a small dialogue with you regarding Saramago, regarding Portugal, regarding my work, or regarding anything that you would like to bring.
Thank you very much, José Luis, and thank you, Ambassador, for the introduction. It's been a vibrant conversation about Saramago. So if anyone's on the floor would like to join and ask anything, now is the moment. If not, I'd like to ask you something, but perfect, great, much better. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you for your talk, very interesting. I'm curious, I have a question, because Saramago, when I was growing up, I'm from Portugal, when I was growing up, he was kind of introduced to me as a rebel in literature, and he broke many barriers stylistically in terms of what he wrote about. But I also think he goes in this Portuguese tradition of being in conversation with literature masterpieces of the past. In conversation and in dialogue. So I wanted to talk to you about this sort of, I'd like for you to expand on these sort of double two sides of Saramago, of being a rebel, but also very much in the tradition and in conversation. And also, I've read some of your work. I'm a big fan. And I also think I see a lot of parallels between some of the thematics in Saramago and some of your work. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the most important legacy of Saramago in today's Portuguese literature? And what do you think do you think there's a before and after Saramago in Portuguese literature?
Well, thank you very much. It's interesting because one of the last times I was in the presence of Saramago, he was already a bit frail at the time in terms of health, but it was in a celebration that it was held about celebrating the Nobel Prize for Literature that he got. And at the time, I know that it was by his express will that celebration has been done with readings from Portuguese authors from the past. So a few people were invited, and I was among them. And we were asked to choose an excerpt from a certain author. the author that I had to choose from was Soeiro Pereira Gomes, a neorealistic author. Other people got other authors, but the thing about that, interesting about that event is that it chose to celebrate his own literature with a reading of other authors which were references to him. Actually, an important aspect of the formation of José Saramago as a reader and as an author was his own the attendance he did on important libraries in Lisbon, public libraries, in which he would go and there we would read actually the great masterpieces of Portuguese literature, and that communication with those authors is very visible. Even this book that I already mentioned, Year of the Death of Ricardo Reis, is a proof of his connection with other Portuguese authors. And so I feel as a Portuguese author myself that this tradition that we have in Portugal, this literary tradition, is a very big privilege. It's not a problem. The fact that we have authors like Fernando Pessoa, like José Saramago, like Essa de Queiroz, like so many other authors that I could name here, and of course I would skip some because there are so many that I could never mention them all. But the fact that we have this is of course a responsibility, but at the same time it's a big patrimonio, I don't know the word in English, heritage of literature, and I think it puts us in a place in which we have to live up to that heritage. So that is a real good thing. And José Saramago himself, I feel that he is an author that in Portugal, even though he was always very well read, his books were always very, there were a lot of people reading them and they got a lot of attention always. But I feel that in a certain way today, now we are kind of noticing the certain dimensions of his work that before were probably a bit blurred by his presence. And by this I mean the fact that he was so present in the media, that he was so present, always commenting current politics. It had an impact on the way people read his work. Some if they agreed on him, were at this tendency to praise his work, considering that, and some others, if they did not agree on him, would dismiss him also because of that. And I feel that with time, now we are getting this vision of like a more neutral vision of the work itself, and that is interesting. I mean, it's not better or worse, but it's interesting, and of course, it's a new dimension of Saramago's work. Also, as I said before, I feel that in Portugal, sometimes we have doubts about our own dimension, about ourselves as a country, because we have this heroic past that is taught to us in school of the sailors that went, that defied the oceans and went to very faraway places such as Japan. but then we also know that we are a small country in the corner of Europe with less population than Tokyo. And so sometimes these two dimensions give us a bit of a bipolar vision of ourselves, and works such as the one Saramago did, attitudes such as the one that Saramago had, which was always very daring, which was always very, very bold. I think they contribute a lot to the whole identity of Portuguese people, and that I think is more and more recognized and accepted.
Thank you very much. We just have time for the last question of today. It happens to be in Zoom. It's a pity because
I speak too much.
No, not at all. It's been a pleasure.
Portugal is traditionally considered a Catholic country par excellence, if I'm not mistaken. Then, what's like to be an atheist like José Saramago in Portugal? And also, how is his Iberismo received there?
Sorry, I did not understand. How is it?
Received his Iberismo.
But before that,
how is it to be an atheist like José Saramago in Portugal? And how is his Iberismo received there?
So I feel that those are two specific aspects that have brought a lot of polemics in his time. Both of those for different reasons. His atheism and this relationship with the Catholics and the Catholic hierarchy and the Catholic religion has been a lot of people have talked about it, and it's probably one of his characteristics that is more debated. Because, of course, Portugal has this tradition on Catholicism, and the way he discussed some dogmas of the Bible have shocked a few people. And at the time, and we're here talking about the 90s, probably there was no experience of bringing those subjects to the public sphere in the way that he did. And so that is a very strong aspect of his work and of the way he led his public presence. And I feel that some people, even today, have not forgotten that and still hold grudges against him because of that. But at the same time, I also think that there are some people realizing that he brought that subject so often because there is also some kind of quest for these subjects in his work. I'll try to be fast because we don't have much time, but I would say that the center of José Saramago's work is the human being, his reflection on the human being. And so as he is writing about the human being, as he is questioning the human being, as he is putting all those very big and important questions about the human being, if the human being is good or bad, if we are as humankind going through a better future, or if we are doomed, he would also bring the contrast between the human and the divine. And so I think that personally, if you read the books, they are not as aggressive as his statements, his public statements. And the books, they are definite, and they are something that are still here today. The public statements, they are in the past more and more. Regarding the Iberism, I think in Portugal, we have a difficult relationship with Spain. That's history. It has to do with the fact that we have always, in our history, fought for our independence, and that was something that we had to prove over and over. And so, incredibly enough, even today, when there is no threat to our independence, I think as a country, we still have that seed of proving our independence. And Saramago, he was well ahead of that, and he defended an Iberian vision of the world, also because he was so connected with Spain. And some people did not accept some suggestions that he did of mingling both countries. But I think, you know, thinkers are always gonna think, and are always gonna share their visions, and those visions they should be seen as provocations, as ideas that lead us to question the things that we take for granted, and also I feel that even though maybe some people did not fully accepted those suggestions, they are very valid, and they also lead us to question our relationship, which is, and it's funny to be here mentioning this in Cervantes Institute, because of course there are a lot of things that there are to be done to have a closer relationship between Portugal and Spain. And of course, Saramago defended that.
José Luis Peixoto, thanks a million for an extraordinary conversation, wonderful remarks, and thank you everybody for being here and for this wonderful session. We hope to have you back in Japan with new projects and new ideas. We're going to have a break of 5 minutes till we prepare the next session, and we see you all very, very soon. Thank you very much.